Okay, now we're going to talk about the verbs that are on page 96 in the new edition, or 95 in the 5th edition of Ariba. And the reason your book gives you these two verbs separately is that you've learned a couple of verbs like ser, you've had a little bit of tener that are slightly unusual, and then you've learned your regular verbs. Okay, now here you're learning verbs that are sort of normal, but not quite. And I'm going to start with one that is sort of normal, but not quite, but not for the kind of verb that it is. So let's start with the verb. The verb ear, pronounced like this thing on the side of your head, ear, means to go. And it's only two letters, I and R. Therefore, it's an IR verb. There's nothing else to work with but the I and the R. It has to be an IR verb. But it does not conjugate like an IR verb. It conjugates as if it were an AR verb with a V for a stem. As if it were var, V-A-R. If you think of var, when you look at the conjugation, you see that it's normal except for the yo form. The yo form has an extra Y, voy, but the others are V plus the right endings for AR verbs. Vas, va, vamos, vais, van. Voy, vas, va, vamos, vais, van. And those are the conjugations for the IR verb ear. It has a regular AR verb conjugation with a Y and a yo form. And in this chapter, that's very similar to estar, which is an AR verb and has a Y and a yo form also. And the only difference in the endings between this one and estar is that estar has 3 extra accents that this one doesn't have. Okay, that's the conjugation, strange as it is. Now let's look at the use of the verb to go. And in Spanish, the verb to go is always followed by an or most of the time at least, it's followed by an You have the verb to go plus your which means to, plus maybe an infinitive. For example, I am going to the store. Voy a la tienda. La tienda means the store. I'm going to the store. I have a. Or I might say, I am going, that would be ear plus plus destination. I might say, I'm going to buy milk. Voy a comprar leche. There's my ear plus my infinitive to buy. And we just did ear plus my destination to go to the store. And in English, whether you're going to do something or going to a place, you have the to after the verb to go. I'm going to the store. I'm going to buy milk. And in Spanish, you have the equivalent of the to, which is the Now, you don't always have the For example, if I want to say, I want to go, yo quiero ir. I want to go. When it comes at the end of the sentence, it's not followed by the but most of the time it is. And if you're choosing between this one and another verb, for example, in this chapter they have ir and hacer together, and they give exercises with both verbs. One of the clues that the verb to go is the one that fits there is that there will be an in some form after the blank where the verb should go. So either be an by itself, or perhaps an with an L at the end, al, which is the same as to the al, and it gets combined down to al. Okay, the other verb on page 96 or 95 in the 5th edition is the verb hacer, that means to do or make. And similar to ear, which is a regular AR verb conjugation except for its yo form, hacer is a regular ER verb except for its yo form. And the yo form there's a G. Instead of H-A-C-O, you get H-A-G-O. And one reason for a G instead of a C is that all these other engines follow the stem with an E, but the yo form follows it with an O. And the reason that's important is a C with an O after it is not pronounced the same as a C with an E after it. It goes from hacer with an S sound to co if it were a C with a K sound. So we have sort of a substitute that's not quite as hard as the K sound. We get the hard G, which is ago. Anyway, the yo form has a G, which is irregular, but that's the only irregular thing about the verb. The rest of the forms are stem plus the right ER verb endings. Ago, ases, hacemos, haces, hacen. Those are my conjugations for the verb hacer. And again, the verb hacer means to do or make. And so let's talk about some phrases that are perhaps a little bit different from English. We have, for example, hacer un picnic, to do a picnic. In English you usually have a picnic, but in Spanish you can do a picnic. There's another similar phrase, hacer las maletas, to pack the bags. In Spanish, you're doing the bags, the maletas, but in English, you're packing them. And here's another phrase that's a little strange. ¿Qué tiempo hace? What weather does it make? And here's my verb to do or make. So what's the weather doing, or what is the he or she doing weather-wise? Whoever the subject of the he or she is. And there are phrases that go with this. For example, if I say hace sol, that literally means it makes sun, but it's a way of saying it's sunny. Or you might say hace buen tiempo, it makes nice weather. Or hace frío, it's cold. Or hace calor, it's hot. And you use some of the words similar to the phrases you learned with tener in this same chapter. Okay, so we have the verb hacer. It's a regular ER verb, except for the yo form, which has the G. And there are a few phrases which are a little unusual. And again, this and the verb ir are in your book on page 96 at the new edition, or 95 in edition 5 of Ariba.